I think I speak on behalf of every F1 fan, not just Ferrari fans, when I say that they're unfit to challenge Red Bull and even Mercedes for a world championship at the moment. That was proven right now at the Hungarian Grand Prix. It doesn't matter if you're a Lewis fan, a Max fan, a Ferrari fan, you name it. It's not good for the sport when one team just constantly messing up, making blunders, whether it be strategic errors or driving mistakes, and letting the other team and driver just run away with the championship, taking these points. And we witnessed that again today in Hungary. This time it was Ferrari's strategy, letting Max, well, not just Max, but also Checo, both Mercedes, starting, well, George on pole, but Max starting P10, Lewis starting P7, Checo starting P11, all managed to finish ahead of Leclerc. If they're serious about winning a world championship, this needs to stop. If you're slightly confused as to what the mistake was in Hungary, Leclerc had a really easy lead. He had a reasonable buffer to George Russell, Sainz, Max, and Hamilton, who were around 5 seconds behind Leclerc at the time. That's an easy win. All you have to do is mirror the strategy of the guys behind and just bring it home. 25 points. Max will probably finish second, adding 7 points to the deficit. That's what we all thought. But no, Ferrari decided to pit Leclerc to cover the undercut from Max, but used a hard tyre. This was a tyre which both Alpines had just finished a really bad stint on. They were at the front of the midfield, comfortably ahead of the Astons of Danny Rick, Haas. And then when they put the hards on, they just got swallowed by all these cars, just because they couldn't get the tyres in the window at all. In these cooler temperatures, it was and the air was slightly moist with the rain. It was impossible to generate enough tyre temps and thus enough grip from the hard tyre. And ultimately, this was Charles Leclerc's downfall. As soon as Leclerc came out of the pits, Max Verstappen was pretty much on his tail, being on fresh tyres, having performed the undercut. So that was expected. He gained about 2.5 seconds, having used a new set of tyres for 2 or 3 laps. But once Leclerc comes out of the pits, you'd expect him to warm up his tyres and maintain that gap with the pace he had throughout the race. But because the tyre was the hardest compound, he couldn't generate any temperature at all, was struggling for grip, and Max just cruised past him with DRS. But now Max has been passed. You've got Mercedes and Perez behind in slower machinery. That should be it, right? No. George Russell hounded Leclerc for a number of laps and eventually got past him, as the medium was just a much better race tyre. George could keep the tyres in the window, keep a good consistent pace in the 23s, whereas Leclerc dropped off in the 24s. There may have been some graining from the hard tyre, as there was just not enough temperature being offered from the surface. And he got passed by George Russell in the Mercedes, who were inferior to Ferrari on the same compound. To add insult to injury, Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton performed what I think was the optimal strategy, extending the second stint on the medium tyre, putting on some softs at the end, and they managed to jump Leclerc as well, who eventually had to make another pit stop because Perez was going to, close the gap and pass him. So they pitted Leclerc for some soft tyres to cover off Checo and hopefully pass him on track. But Leclerc, I don't know where his head was at the time. He probably wasn't in a good headspace. Didn't have any pace at all on the soft tyres. When you compare to Lewis Hamilton, who was set at 21.3 as his fastest lap time, Leclerc didn't get anywhere near that on the same compound. And ultimately, Hamilton hounded George Russell and came second. So Ferrari definitely made a massive mistake. It's not just strategically, but operationally, things just haven't never been on point for Ferrari for a number of years. Let's go back to 2017, which was in this era of Ferrari, challenging for titles. It was the first time they did it since 2012. They had a really good car underneath them, and Seb Vettel was leading the championship after Hungary going the summer break. But then both team and driver did implode a little bit. Vettel made some big mistakes in Singapore. They had a bad qualifying in Italy, which meant they couldn't challenge for the win. But also, Ferrari with reliability just kept blowing up and having loads of issues. I remember Japanese Grand Prix, Malaysian qualifying, and it was just a downward spiral from there. So when you come to 2018, same situation, great car, Vettel had great pace. Driver and team operational mistakes, again, happened. Is that internal pressure from the higher ups in the team being put on the driver that they're making mistakes? And also strategically, in Monza, they gave Kimi Raikkonen the toe when it should have been Sebastian Vettel, who was clearly the number one. That cost Vettel an easy pole in what was the quickest car that day. And he found himself tangled up with Lewis Hamilton because he was behind Kimi Raikkonen at the start. He got spun around, which was entirely Vettel's fault. And again, a downward spiral. The same thing happened in Germany. They left Kimi out in front of Seb when they should have just swapped the places straight away. Vettel did bin it all by himself. Would that have happened without the pressure and the need to push harder because Kimi was holding him up? We'll never know. In Singapore, in the qualifying session, Ferrari put Vettel out into traffic, which meant that he couldn't get the tyres in the window. And ultimately, Hamilton, with one of the greatest laps of all time, was unbeatable anyway. But these little mistakes here and there have always been Ferrari's Achilles heel. And in 2019, that trend continued. At the start of the season, Leclerc and Vettel were always found themselves together on track, and they kept swapping places and swapping back, letting both Mercedes just run away with a consecutive 1-2s. I think it was 6 in a row. It was absolutely abysmal to watch. And then they got themselves sorted out with the engine tricks in the second half of the season, but the damage had already been done. In 2020, we all know what happened with the engine. There was some dodgy things going on with them and the FIA, which meant they lost all their engine power, and they found themselves 5th, 6th fastest car. All their own doing, of course. In 2021 was good, made a good step, but battling in the midfield is not the same as fighting Red Bull and Mercedes at the front of the field. And once again, they found themselves in that position this year, and they're crumbling. They're folding like pancakes every single time, whether it be Leclerc's mistakes in France or Ferrari's strategic errors with Sainz and Leclerc. And that sort of concludes it for today. No real into-depth data yet. None of that has come out, and it takes a little bit of time to get all of that done. There'll be a video later on in the week showing the race pace and the data of the weekend more in depth, so stay tuned. But this was just a bit more of a roundup of the Hungarian Grand Prix, which just finished, and some of the mistakes Ferrari have been making. So if you agree, leave a comment. Please like, subscribe to the channel. It'll be much appreciated. Until next time, take care. Peace.